Good morning. Today we are going to start a new chapter of science, that is combustion and flame. In this chapter, the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter are as follows. First is combustion, second is firefighting, third is flame, and fourth one is fuel. So one by one we will discuss about all these topics in this chapter. Firstly, we will know about that what is combustion. So firstly we are going to know about that what is combustion. Students, we use different kinds of fuels for various purposes at home, in industry, and for running automobiles. These fuels are cow dung, wood, coal, charcoal, petrol, diesel, CNG. So these fuels burns to give us energy that we use to do the different activities. The different activities are performed by the burning of these fuels. So firstly we'll know that what is combustion. The burning of these things, the burning of these substances in the presence of oxygen, or we can say that in the presence of air, in which heat and light are produced, is known as combustion. So in simple words we can define it like this. Combustion means burning. Combustion means burning. In this chapter we are going to study about the chemical process of combustion and the types of flames produced during this process. So we can define it like this way also. Combustion is a type of chemical reaction, or we can say that it is a type of chemical process of a burning of a substance in the presence of air, or we can say oxygen, with the liberation of heat and light. So heat and light is liberated during this process, and in this process the combustion or the burning of a substance takes place in the presence of oxygen. So the light which is given off during the combustion, that light is known as flame, or we can say glow. For example, when you burn the wood produce flame, while the coal burns by producing light in the form of glow. So we can say that the light which is given off during the combustion may be either in the form of flame or glow. So we will also know that what are combustible substances. The substances that undergo the combustion is known as combustible substances. For example, I have given you the example such as wood, coal, charcoal, petrol, diesel, CNG. These all are the examples of the combustible substances because they undergo the combustion. Now there are some examples that helps you to understand about the combustion. First example is the combustion of magnesium. As in previous chapter I have told you that when the magnesium ribbon, when it is introduced into a jar containing oxygen, and when it burns with a dazzling white light. So it burns to produce a dazzling white light. So the magnesium, when burns in the presence of oxygen, we will get a white colored powder after the reaction of the magnesium with the oxygen, and that white colored powder is mainly magnesium oxide. And the reaction that takes place, during that reaction it burns with heat and dazzling white light. So it is also the example of the combustion of magnesium. Second one example is the combustion of methane. Methane on burning, it combines with oxygen to form carbon dioxide, water, and giving out heat and light. So this is another example in which the methane burns in the presence of oxygen, and when it burns in the presence of oxygen it produces carbon dioxide, water, and heat and light. Next example is the combustion of charcoal. Charcoal means it is a form of carbon. Charcoal burns means there is burning of carbon. So when the charcoal burns, so we can say that when the carbon reacts with oxygen, when it burns, everything burns in the presence of oxygen only. So when the charcoal burns or the carbon reacts with oxygen, it forms carbon dioxide gas, and heat and light is liberated. So this is another example of the combustion. So these are the examples that lets you to understand about that what is this combustion process. So we can define it like this: combustion is a type of chemical process of a burning of a substance in the presence of oxygen with the liberation of heat and light. So this is about the combustion. Our next topic is about that what are the conditions that is necessary for the combustion to take place. So we are going to know about that what are the conditions, and there is one diagram that shows you a triangle, and that triangle shows that there is a combustible material at the center and its three sides. The first side shows the oxygen, second side shows the heat, and third side shows the fuel. Means that in order to burn a fuel, the three things are required. What are the three things are required for the burning of a combustible material? That three things are: first is that combustible material is required whose combustion takes place. Second thing is presence of oxygen. You are knowing well that anything burns in the presence of oxygen only, so the presence of oxygen is very important. And the third one is what? Third one is that the attainment of the ignition temperature. In our previous chapter we have studied about that what is ignition temperature. Ignition temperature, or we can say the kindling temperature, this is the minimum temperature at which any combustible material starts burning. So the attainment of the ignition temperature is also very important for the combustion to take place. So these three things are very important for the combustion. First is that combustible material is required whose combustion takes place. Second is that it takes place in the presence of oxygen, and third one is that attainment of the ignition temperature. So these things are required for the combustion to take place. So these are the conditions that is necessary for the combustion to takes place. Next we are going to study about that what is ignition temperature. I have already told you that lowest temperature at which the combustible substances catches the fire. So at that minimum temperature at which the combustible material catches the fire is known as ignition temperature. The different substances have their different ignition temperature. Now we are going to know more about that combustible substances have their own ignition temperature. For example, the ignition temperature of white phosphorus is 35 degrees Celsius, so it catches the fire on slight heating. The ignition temperature of red phosphorus is 260 degrees Celsius, so therefore the white phosphorus is kept immersed in water. That white phosphorus is kept immersed in water because when it comes in contact with air, it catches the fire. So that's why it is kept immersed in water, and the red phosphorus stored in ordinary bottles. So this is about the ignition temperature. Next, our next topic is about the combustible and non-combustible substances. Now we are going to know about that what are the combustible substances and what are the non-combustible substances. The substances that catches the fire very readily, that catches the fire very easily, or we can say it catches the fire very readily, that type of substances are mainly known as combustible substances. For example, wood, coal, paper, these all are the example of the combustible substances. Next is about the non-combustible substances. Means the substances which do not catch the fire readily, that type of substances are known as non-combustible substances. The fuel is what? Fuel is a type of combustible substance. So any material that undergoes a combustion is known as combustible substance. We are knowing well, and it is also known as fuel. Some examples of fuels like petrol, diesel. Fuel may be in, we are knowing that the fuels may be in solid state also, liquid state also, and gaseous state also. For example, petrol and diesel are the example of the liquid fuel. Coal is the example of the solid fuel. LPG and CNG is the example of the gaseous fuel. Sometimes so these are the example of the combustible materials. And next that I have told you about the non-combustible substances, means that do not catch the fire readily. That type of substances are known as non-combustible substances. For example, sand, glass, water. These are the substances that do not catch the fire readily, so that's why they are known as non-combustible substances. So this is about the combustible substances and the non-combustible substances. Our next topic is about the inflammable substances. Now we are going to know that which type of substances are known as inflammable substances. These are those materials which have the low ignition temperature. So these are the materials which have the low ignition temperature and it catches the fire easily, and its ignition temperature is low, so that's why it's catch the fire very easily, and that type of substances are known as inflammable substances. For example, petrol, LPG, these are the example of the acetone, kerosene, petrol, diesel, these all are the example of the inflammable substances. Now we are going to know about that the matchstick. So the matchstick, since ages, the matchsticks are in use, we are knowing well. Long ago, Egyptians used small pieces of pine wood and dipped in sulfur as matches. These days, the matchsticks are lot safer. Modern matchsticks are made up with the mixture of antimony, trisulfide, and potassium chlorate, with some glue and starch is applied on the head of the match. Rubbing surface. The rubbing surface has the powdered glass and some red phosphorus. On striking the match against the rough surface, the red phosphorus gets converted into white phosphorus and it reacts with potassium chlorate to ignite the antimony trisulfide, so the combustion takes place. So how the combustion takes place? In case of matchstick, we have known that how the combustion takes place in case of matchstick, and what are the things that is used to make the matchstick, and what its rubbing surface contains, and how its combustion takes place. Next topic is about the fire triangle. Here there is one diagram that shows a triangle, and that triangle is mainly consists of oxygen, heat, fuel, and at the center of that there is a fire. So this fire triangle mainly shows that there are three things that is very important for the combustion to takes place. First is the combustible material whose combustion occurs. Second is the temperature, the minimum temperature at which it catches the fire. It means that its ignition temperature, or we can say the kindling temperature. And third is the sufficient amount of oxygen. The sufficient amount of oxygen is required for the combustion to take place. So these three things are represented in the form of the triangle that is shown in this figure. So this fire triangle shows that there are three things that is required for the combustion to take place. First is that combustible material whose combustion takes place. Second is the attainment of the ignition temperature, and third is the oxygen. That oxygen is also known as supporter of combustion because it supports the combustion process. Because we are knowing well that anything burns in the presence of oxygen only. If there is no oxygen, we are not able to burn anything. So it is known as supporter of combustion. Next is there is one activity, and this activity is mainly to show that air is necessary for the combustion. As we have already studied that, I have told you that what are the three requirements for the combustion to take place, in which I have told you one point, that air is also required. Air contains what? Air contains oxygen. So the oxygen is very important, or we can say that the air is very important for the combustion to take place. So with the help of this activity that is given here, we are able to understand that air is very important for the combustion process. In order to perform this activity, first of all, take a candle and take a lighted candle and fix it on a table. Now, and take another candle and take a glass jar and put that inverted glass jar over that candle and observe it. What you will observe? In first case, you will observe that the candle do not extinguish. It continues to burn. But in second case, what we are observing, that that empty glass that is kept over that lighted candle in second case, and when the oxygen in that empty glass jar, knowing that the empty glass jar is not fully emptied, it contains what? It contains oxygen. So when it's all oxygen are utilized by the candle to burn, when it's all oxygen are gets utilized, in that condition the candle that is inside that inverted glass jar gets extinguished, because in the absence of oxygen, because whatever the oxygen that is present in that inverted glass jar is gets utilized by the candle to burn, and when it utilize all the amount of oxygen that is present inside the inverted glass jar, then finally it gets extinguishes because there is no oxygen. So this activity shows that, and the first case shows that the lighted candle is getting the oxygen continuously from their surrounding, so it remains burning. But in second case, the lighted candle gets extinguished due to the absence of oxygen. So this activity shows that the oxygen is, or we can say that the air is necessary for the combustion to takes place. So this is about this activity, and this activity shows that air is important for the combustion process. Next activity is about, this activity is used to show that the ignition temperature is necessary for the combustion. So in order to perform this activity, what are the materials required? A sheet of paper, water and candle is required. Now we are going to perform this activity. So what are its procedure? First of all, make 2 paper cups by folding the sheets of paper. Now pour 50 ml of water in one of the cup and heat both the cups separately with a candle. So pour 50 ml of water in one of the cups and heat both the cups separately with a candle, and observe both the cups, and observe it carefully. What observation you will get? The empty cup catches the fire and it starts burning. That empty cup, it catches the fire very readily and it starts burning, because it attains its ignition temperature very fast. Next cup is what? The paper cup that containing the water do not catch the fire. It does not catch the fire because the water in that cup, because it is filled with water, because the water in that cup becomes hot. So the heat that is supplied to that cup, it gets absorbed by the water and the water becomes hot. So the paper will not attain its ignition temperature in this case, and we continue to heating up the cup. The water boils in the cup and it reaches the temperature. When it reaches its temperature, and then after at last it catches the fire. So whatever the heat that is supplied in second case, means in the cup, paper cup that contains the water, all the amount of the heat gets absorbed by the water. So that water absorbs the heat and it starts boiling, and when you further heat it, when you further supply the heat to the cup, finally it reaches the ignition temperature and it catches the fire. So this activity shows that the ignition temperature is necessary for the combustion to takes place. So this is about these 2 activities that we have studied today. First is to show that oxygen is necessary for the burning, and second activity is to show that ignition temperature is necessary for the combustion to takes place. So these topics that we have covered today, still some topics are left. Very soon we are going to come with the rest of the topics. So students, revise all the topics that I have taught you today and try to do the exercises that is given in the book. Thank you, students.